at the end of the day, nothing beats showing up every single day and getting work done. That's it. That's the only thing that's real, and that's the one principle that I have lived by since 2019, which is when I started working with Naveen and started taking the sport a lot more seriously. And chatting with him as well, the same belief just keeps getting reinforced over and over and over and over and over again. Dinner table conversations don't matter. The conversations that you may have after the race, hey, what's your FTP? What's your FTP? What is your max power? None of that really matters. The only thing that matters is the quality of work you do. And that's it. You do the work. Doesn't matter if you're uploaded to Strava or not. You do the work. You get the result. You go back home. You train again. You do the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, for me, the go-to, especially a flat course, is start off super conservative and then gradually ramp it up as the effort comes to you, rather than holding one power for the whole race, or rather than starting off too hard and then blowing up at the end. This is what it would be for a flat TT. For an undulating TT, like the one in Goa, for example, for me it was the same thing. The goal is to negative, but that negative splitting also needs to be done in accordance with the terrain. So for me, instead of dividing my race into 4 quarters, a lot of it was actually done by feel, because you can't remember numbers for 50 different segments in the race. So a lot of the race in Goa was actually done by feel. For me, the only numbers that I had pinned down in my head was the watts I'm supposed to be doing on that big climb, because I knew that one big climb is eventually going to be the winning factor.
I am Venki, a working professional in IT as well as an amateur masters athlete and a coach for endurance sports. You are listening to the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, I have a small request from you. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also let me know what you like and what you would like to listen to more of by commenting in the comment section on YouTube. I promise to do my best to improve with each episode and bring you the best content that helps you and me get better each day. In this episode, I talked to Chinmay Kewalramani. Chinmay is a cyclist with 2 bronze medals, one at the Nationals in under 23 category and one in elite category at National Games 2023. One of those medals came just 12 weeks after he crashed and shattered his collarbone in training. Coming back from a surgery like that and ending up on the podium at the Nationals is a testament to his resilience. While pursuing his own goals at the Nationals and beyond, Chinmay also works with a few athletes and guides them in their athletic journey as a coach. For someone who is so young, it is amazing to see the clarity of thought and the curiosity to keep learning and growing. In this episode, he shares his cycling journey with a few insights into his training, his hydration, and nutrition for training and racing. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, the Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyVenki on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast. Hi, Chinmay. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Venki. Thanks for having me.
So, Chinmay, we've been meaning to do this in person, but
Been a while. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, you come in for say a race, and you are like, before the race you are like in that zone, and after the
yeah,
race you fly off, so couldn't quite manage it,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know doing it person. But
yeah,
then the next best thing is maybe remote, right?
yeah. It's been a
So
while, but I'm glad we're
let's
doing it now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let us start by talking about what was your relationship with sport growing up.
When I was in school, I always wanted to be a footballer. I was never good at it, but I wanted to be a footballer. I was absolutely terrible. But eventually, after that, as I finished school and got into college, I started cycling, from home to tuitions and racing an auto rickshaw to the next signal and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I got into sport, just by commuting around and riding with my friends in my society. And eventually after that, I found a local bike shop and I found out that these guys go on these tours. Every day they'll be riding 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers. And I would look at that and go like, whoa, 20 kilometers cycling, that is massive. I have to do this. So I went on one of those, and after 20 kilometers, I came back home. I think I was about 15 years old or 16 years old back then. And I went out, I came back after 20 kilometers. I was fried. I don't remember being that tired in a very long time. And I slept for like 4 hours after the ride. And you know that type two fun that you get, that when you're done with your ride, you keep your bike on the side, like I'm never touching this thing again. And then something happens, and 12 hours later, like I have to do this again tomorrow. So and that eventually snowballed into what it is today. I met a lot of people from the community. I was my initial few years in cycling were around the Pune community, and I met a lot of people. They were super helpful. They told me about a lot of races. Back then, I didn't really know, bicycle racing was a thing. I learned about the differences between track and mountain and road and BMX and so forth. And I was very fascinated by road cycling. I think probably something to do with the adrenaline of it. I'm sure there's a lot of adrenaline in the other ones as well, but for some reason, something about road cycling just drew me to it, and that just so I found out about a lot of other races. One of the races I found out when I was just getting into the sport was BBCH, and I've been coming for BBCH races since I think my first one was in 2017 or 2018. I think I had done this in the under 18 category, and I crashed and finished in some. I really don't remember. I don't think it was the top 10, maybe 10th or 15th or something. But that was my first experience of a proper road race, and that eventually snowballed into what it is today.
Nice, nice. So if you were doing under 18 in 2017, how old are you now?
I am 20. I'm turning 24 next month.
So you are you still participating in under 23?
No, no, I'm in elite now. So my
Uh,
first year in the elite category was the Bijapur Nationals, which was in Jan 2024.
right, right, right. So it is funny, right? You know, when you look at the when you start so early, and when you go through so many races, so many experiences, I mean, you forget that you are still so young. Right.
Yeah,
And I so that is really fascinating. So the year you got into uh, r- racing as kind of road cycling was what, 2016 or 17?
I think my first race was in 2017. I was racing locally in
Hmm.
Pune, so we would have these inter-school races where maybe 8 people would show up, and out of those eight, three would have road bikes, and I would finish third. And that's how my journey started, and then I got cleats, and then I got a jersey and stuff like that. But yeah, that's I think. So that was 2016. That's when I would do these kind of races, and then 17 was my first proper experience at the BBCH Classic.
Nice, nice. So what was that experience like? Uh, First race outside Pune, first race in Bangalore, with larger group, right? So what was that experience like?
Scary. It's because when you're so used to riding alone, so all of my training rides at the time were basically alone. I had never ridden around a big group of people. And in 17, when I came to Bangalore to do the race, I never knew that I would end up taking cycling so seriously ever. It was one of those things that I started doing just for fun. It was kind of like my escape from, regular school life and regular college life. And now it's not an escape. Now it's the thing, right? So back then, the reason it was so scary was mostly because of the fact that you're riding at 45, 50 k's an hour, surrounded by 40, 50 people, and not a lot of people would ride their bikes in a straight line. But by then I knew what drafting was. I knew the importance of aerodynamics. I knew the importance of conserving energy. So for me, the whole objective was just be in the pack, somewhere in the pack. Don't go in front too early. Don't waste your energy too early. I couldn't even see the front of the road. And it's stuff like that that was really, really, really scary for me, to be surrounded by so many people riding at 45 kilometers an hour, not being able to see the road in front of you, with people, wriggling around and stuff. And when I started the race, I think it was about 10 minutes or 15 minutes in. And it still took me so much time to just settle into being able to ride in a pack in the first place. I kept telling myself, I hope I don't crash. I hope I don't crash. I hope I don't crash. And then suddenly the guy in front, he touches the wheel and boom, I go down. So I did the rest, I don't know, the 50 or 60 kilometers solo. But yeah, that's, if there's any emotion that I remember, if there's any feeling I remember from the 17 BBCH Classic, I don't remember if it was exactly 17 or 18, but if there's any emotion or feeling I remember, it's probably just being petrified of riding in a bunch.
Right. I mean, that is the feeling that is, I think, can be a common thread for most of our first races. It's like being uncertain, being just kind of scared and nervous. These are the feelings that most of us have for our first big races, I would think.
I think cyclists in general, well, most of them are good people, that they would always take care of the people that are around them. So, because the thing about bunch riding is that you're not just dependent on yourself for your safety. You're dependent on the people around you. And in so many cases, when you're riding in a bike race, if somebody else does something to mess things up, then he or she is probably going to bring half the pack down with them. The good thing is that a lot of people understand the responsibility that they have. And I mean, I have done bike races where I have literally seen people ride without brake shoes. So that those are scary experiences, and those are always one-off experiences. But for the most part, most people realize that they have this responsibility, that they have to be safe, and the slightest touch of wheels means they're going down and they're bringing down the whole pack with them. So it's nice to be raced. It's always nice to be racing around people that know that they are responsible not just for themselves but for the people around them as well.
Right. Yeah. So when what happens, especially for you know the amateur and the under 18 packs, more so in BBCH where there are bigger groups, right? What happens is that most of the guys, for most of those guys, these are like the initial few races. It can be either first race for most of them. It can be, you know maybe for 2 3, second or third race or something like that, right? Initial few races. And funnily enough, it could be the not just first race. it could be first group ride as well,
Yeah.
right? That is what makes it all the more sketchy.
Yeah.
That is why, here in Bangalore, I kind of insist that people try and join group rides, uh, where you get to ride with other fellow riders in a group. You understand what holding your line means, what happens if you don't hold your line and deviate, what happens if you are like overlapping wheels, and all these kind of come into the picture. They get a chance to learn all this in if you are joining group rides before you kind of take a leap and jump into that 40 or 50 odd group, big peloton, right? So I think now with you guys are doing group rides and bunch races in Goa, and group rides and in cities like Hyderabad, Chennai. Now there are like more people riding in groups, so automatically you can see the effects, like kind of translating a little bit into, uh, at least in the elite bunch, it's a little bit you know more predictable, because of course it can not be 100% safe, because you see the pro races as well, right? They have been riding all their lives, and still they end up having a lot of crashes and
Yeah.
stuff.
I think now
It
there's
is
more
just
crashes
it's
than I can remember. I mean, I've been watching pro racing since 17, and I have never heard about the sheer number of crashes that have happened in, the end of 2023 and 2024 alone. So it's quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Scary.
that is I think, I mean, there are theories about them being caused by disc brakes coming into the picture, but that's for another day, another
That's
topic
for
to
another
discuss.
podcast.
Definitely. But in general, if you are, if people who are getting into racing, if they get into group riding more, right? It They will get that, they won't be as scared. They will know what to expect, how to kind of maneuver in the group and stuff like that, right? So excellent. Coming back to you, right? You started racing in 2017 and stuff, right? What were you studying back then?
Back then, I was in the 11th grade, I was studying commerce. And
Mm-hmm.
because I was also working when I was 16, I was actually working in a gym as a personal trainer. And because I was working when I was
Ah.
16, I the college that I was in Pune, it was from a board called ISC, which is a very, how do I put it? It's a very academic centric board. So it's the kind of education system that is not going to allow you to focus too much on anything outside of academics. And I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I had absolutely no idea. But I knew that wherever this is going to take me, I probably don't want to be there because I'm probably going to land up in some corporate job if I continue with this. And I knew for a very long time that I did not want to be sitting in a cubicle and working all day. So I shifted my college from 11th to 12th from studying commerce in an ISC board, which was known as a reputed board, air quotes, moving on to studying arts in a state board where admission wasn't really necessary. So I I ended up shifting in 12th, and I went to college maybe once in 2 weeks or once in 3 weeks when I had to like submit assignments and stuff like that, only so that I can continue working on the side. So I was working in a gym from 2016 to the end of 2018, if I remember correctly, and then after that I left. So after that, when I finished my arts 12th grade, I eventually did a bachelor's in business administration. But yeah, that's just a namesake degree, honestly. I'm just not like I'm doing
Right,
anything
right.
with that degree right now.
I mean, you are running your own coaching business. That is something. But we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
uh, how did you end up becoming a personal trainer at such an young age?
Um, I was always very fascinated with human physiology and the science of human movement, kinesiology. I was What initially got me into it was how one small piece of the puzzle can influence another piece of the puzzle miles away. If you've got a prone right foot, how does that affect the spine? How does that affect the left shoulder? If your pelvis is rotated towards the right side, how does that affect in, more saddle sores towards one side than the other? Stuff like that. So initially it was just sheer fascination and curiosity. It was a topic that I was inclined towards. I also had a lot of fun working with people. So being able to get people achieve their goals, it doesn't really matter who that person is in that case, whether it is, somebody who walks through the door and says, "Hey, Chinmay, my brother's wedding is in 3 months and I need to lose 20 kilos before that," or it's somebody that says, "Hey, I want to impress this girl. I want to become a little more muscular," stuff like that. So it's I really like to work with people, especially in the human physiology department. So that's eventually what got me into personal training. It was just fascination about the human body. It was just curiosity. Um, Eventually, what got me into cycling coaching after that, because I actually don't take personal training clients anymore. I think I stopped. It's been quite. I think it's been almost a year since I stopped now, if I remember correctly. Maybe a few months, maybe a bit less than a year. But it's kind of like the same thing that got me into cycling coaching because I was fascinated with the concept of energy pathways. I knew that any endurance sport at its core, whether it's cycling or running or swimming or triathlons or anything really, any endurance sport is has so much to do with oxygen transport versus oxygen demand versus oxygen supply. And it's exactly the same thing. I was just fascinated, decided to learn a little more about it, and found out that okay, this is a skill that I have that I can use to add value to the people around me. So why not? Let's do it. And exactly the same thing got me into cycling coaching as well. And cycling coaching was more because I kind of noticed this gap between most Indian cyclists and quality coaching services. And back then I was working with Naveen, and he was still is to a very large extent a big role model of mine. And I knew that he's working with a set of people that are eventually going to take this sport further and further and further forward, kind of bringing Indian road cycling to the global stage. And we have been very successful doing that so far, and I'm sure we'll continue to be doing that as well. And I was like, if I can take that knowledge, combine it with some of the knowledge that I have, and help three people around me, and these three people are eventually going to help three people around them, then it's kind of going to have this compounding effect in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it has. So it all stemmed from that seed of curiosity, fascination. That's it.
Yeah, that is very interesting, right? There is coaching is not same as you riding the
Yeah.
bike well, right? It needs a little bit of a different aptitude um, to kind of be curious about things in general, how things work, how what is happening with physiologically, what are the adaptations certain workouts bring versus some others, and how are people reacting to different people reacting to the same workout. And it's also about not just the workouts and the plans but also the people, right? If you don't have the aptitude for the people, to be interacting with them, to be understanding where they are coming from, what their goals, aspirations and all that, right? And the emotional quotient as well, right? That aptitude for coaching is a lot different from one's ability to ride a bike well. And I think I remember you know NJ talk we were chatting I think one when after one of the podcasts or something like that, and I remember him mentioning about you, and mentioning that he's looking to get into coaching and all that, and I was like, how old is he? He's like, no, but he's very clear about what he wants to do with life and all that. Like, that is interesting, and I found it fascinating, right? Uh, for someone like me, when I was your age, I was still studying, but I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with my life, right? But it's great to see that kind of clarity in in a person as young as you. But I think your personality also suits. You have that aptitude to for coaching, is what I mean to say.
Yeah. I think when we use the word coaching, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And the
Mm.
approach that I have at the moment is a very hands off approach. It's not really a hands on approach. So, what I mean when I say that is the way I look at it is my job is just to play around with different faders. The way I see it, I've got 10 different faders in front of me. And my job is, of course, within specific principles, my job is to tweak this one plus 5, plus 10, plus 15, minus 5, minus 10, and see how the athlete responds to it. And based on their response, keep tweaking those faders over and over and over and over and over again until they eventually get to their goal. Until they get to their goal, the off season was over, all the faders are back set to zero again, and we need to repeat the process all over again. So my process of coaching is a very hands off approach in the sense that I look at myself as someone who provides the athlete with direction. It's the athlete that brings the goals. It's the athlete that brings the ambition and the work ethic to back it up. And the only thing that I do is give the athlete direction, and that's about it. Um, that's and believe me, I know how you feel when NJ says some 20-year-old kid wants to become a coach. I know exactly how that feels. I'm still that 23-year-old kid that being said, and
Yeah, yeah.
but honestly, I right now I am a cyclist. I like to think I'm a half decent coach as well. But one of the things I've realized is I don't like to attach my identity to something very specific. I mean, right now, a large part of me still does attach my identity to that of a cyclist and that of a cycling coach. But there is a lot of clarity, yes. But when I say I don't like to attach my identity to something, what I mean is I'm doing this because it makes me happy. There is probably going to be a point in my life where it's not. I'm not saying that it's ever going to come. I'm saying that's a possibility. Right now, I'm Chinmay the cyclist and Chinmay the cycling coach. Tomorrow, I may be Chinmay the footballer, and maybe in 15 years from now, I may be Chinmay the guy who's working as a chef in a fancy restaurant. Who knows, right? That's a possibility as well. So I have clarity in the sense that I'm going to pursue things that make me happy, number one, and pursue things that are going to add value to the people around me because that's a big part of what I do. I don't do this for myself alone. I do this for the people that are around me. And that's the thing, right? It's the goal of Indian cycling is the one that's high up there in the stars. And if I can play a part in bridging that gap between Indian cyclists and quality coaching services because that gap was there, still is there, then why not?
Yeah. That again kind of goes back to that clarity. You got to have that. The interesting thing you mentioned about is not attaching ourselves to that one identity,
Yeah.
right? it is so important, right? That to have that clarity that I'm doing it right, doing this now because I'm enjoying this, and it can very well be something else in the future, right? So having that clarity also is very important. And um, and all of us are kind of uh, all of us have a little bit of role to play in moving the needle of Indian cycling a little bit ahead, because it we all know that it has like miles and miles to go before we do anything significant at the international level, right? Even at a Asian level for that matter, right? So the all of us are kind of contributing, like you said. uh, NJ has played and is playing the biggest role in amongst the people in this kind of generation, where he's the one who landed here in 2012 and kind of changed the landscape, not by doing anything dramatic, but setting an example with the ways to train using power meter, the ways to train around the year, the discipline. Now you don't see, there was a time where people were just turning up, putting getting on the bikes 2-3 weeks before nationals, and showing up for the races, right? I don't think that's the situation right now. Like, the majority of the people are kind of riding year round,
Yeah.
and training with power. There was a time where none of us knew what Strava was, none of us knew what power meters were, and more so in the in the what national level categories, right? The railways, the all these air forces and stuff like that, they were like showing up, and for a few weeks before the nationals they would ride and show up and win the races and stuff. That is not the case now anymore.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, it took like, now we are in 24, 12 years, and but we see the change, right? But we will need many more of NJs, the the Chinmays, the Joels, the Srinath, Lakshmikants, many more of you guys kind of did doing what NJ did and doing to kind of lift the sport further and further, right? Both, since you guys are, you still have a lot more cycling left in you guys to, as a cyclist and as mentors and kind of guides for the generations to come.
The only thing that is real is the work. That's it.
Mm.
Nothing beats that.
Yeah.
And I've realized that it's so important for any cyclist to have a supportive community around them. This is going back to what we were chatting about earlier about being part of group rides, understanding
Mm.
how different people maneuver around a pack, even if it's as small as a group of 6 people or 10 people. It's still so important to understand how close you're supposed to be to the wheel in front, not so close that you're going to touch wheels, not so far that you don't get the draft. It's important to have that community around you, yes, but at the end of the day, nothing beats showing up every single day and getting work done. That's it. That's
Mm.
that's the only thing that's real, and that's the one principle that I have lived by since 2018, 2019, which is when I started working with Naveen and started taking the sport a lot more seriously. And chatting with him as well, the same belief just keeps getting reinforced over and over and over and over and over again. Dinner table conversations don't matter. the conversations that you may have after the race. Hey, what's your FTP? What's your FTP? What is your max power? None of that really matters. The only thing that matters is the quality of work you do, and that's it. You do the work. Doesn't matter if you upload it to Strava or not. You do the work. You get the result. You go back home. You train again. You do the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, you cannot change the landscape of anything in 2 days. It takes 12 years.
Yeah,
Case in point.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And although uh, it's not like NJ decided I'm going to change the landscape, right? All he did was living by his principles, putting in the work like you just mentioned, right?
Yeah,
Just showing up time and time again and putting in the work, and leading by example, so to speak, right? And it's not like it has been smooth sailing for him. I mean, all of us go through ups and downs, and he is no different. And it is a lonely pursuit at the end of the day. When you have to wake up and show up and you are not really feeling that day, for those VO2 intervals or whatever, you have to figure, what's is it actually the body saying, you need more rest, or is it that mind playing tricks on you, right?
yeah. This is where it's so important to have the ability to differentiate between what your body is telling you and what your mind is telling you, because
Mm,
it's it's so incredibly important to understand which is which, and it's important to understand that motivation is probably not going to get you very far. That's the big difference, with a very thick wall in between, the difference between motivation and the difference between discipline. Because I think that motivation is not something any athlete can rely on. It's not something any athlete should rely on, simply because it's one of those things that's just going to come and go, right? You're
yeah,
never always going to feel like it, and if you keep waiting to feel like it, then it's probably never going to happen. So I um, I listen to a lot of podcasts from Dr. Andrew Huberman. I'm sure you've heard of him. I'm sure you've listened to some of his
yeah,
podcasts
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
And one of the things that he was saying while he was on somebody else's podcast, the Rich Roll podcast, was a lot of people approach this paradigm from the other way. A lot of people look at it as, I am going to feel better and eventually I will start to take action. When in reality, it's the complete opposite. It's always action first, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions follow, never the other way around.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. That is so important for us to realize. And it took me ages to actually realize that nowadays, I just mechanically put on the bibs, then get on the trainer, and then decide
Yeah.
what I'm going to do, right?
Automate the beginning, the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right. let's
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about uh, what your training looks like nowadays, a
Now,
typical training week like.
honestly, right now, most of it is on the home trainer because monsoons have
Hmm.
started in Goa. And
Right.
we still do quite a lot of group rides outdoors. And I love doing group rides. And the Goan community, the guys over here are super nice, and they're all getting stronger and stronger and stronger every passing season. So monsoons is kind of that part of the year where me and a lot of the athletes I work with, some of our training, especially the days on which we're going to be doing our zone two rides or our group rides, they kind of coincide. So I try to get them done together because nobody has to spend 5 hours or 4 hours on the home train, or even outside solo for that matter. It's always fun to be doing it in a group. So a lot of my training is on the home trainer right now. Maybe there'll be a group ride 1 or 2 times a week, but that's about it. Maybe I'll be hitting the gym twice in the week as well, but that's really it. There's no races on the horizon for me at the moment. Maybe the next race I'll do is probably going to be a TT in August or September, but that's about it. Most of my training is just ticking off all the intervals on the home trainer and then maybe heading out on a Sunday, but that's it.
Right. And what is the volume look like now?
For me, this coming week, it's 15 hours on the bike and 90 minutes in the gym. So this
Right.
is
And
kind of like
how
my average week. I will, there'll be very few weeks where I'll be doing less than 11, 12 hours on the bike. There'll be very few weeks where I'll be doing more than 17, 18 hours on the bike as well.
right? Is it the same as you get closer to a race as well?
The closer you get to a race, the more race like your training should get. So that's the whole principle of specificity in the first place. But the answer is it really depends.
In terms of
There is,
volume, it in terms of volume, I mean.
in terms of volume, usually my volume stays pretty constant throughout the whole year. So for me personally, the most important race for me in the whole year, the A category race, is usually the nationals. And that's the way it is this year. That's the way it has been for the past few years. The volume is usually largely the same. There will be a small spike in volume around summertime. So maybe March, April, May, there'll be a small spike in volume. That's where I'll be getting a lot of my time in zone two. And then after that, the closer I get to nationals, which is usually by the end of the year. This year it's scheduled to be in October, but it's usually by the end of the year. So the closer I get to nationals, because my goal at nationals is the ITT, which is an effort that's shorter than 60 minutes. So for me, because of that, it's usually going to be a little bit lesser in terms of volume towards nationals. Maybe in the 2 months that lead up to nationals, I'll probably be reducing a little bit and focusing a little bit more on maybe a bit more time spent on the TT bike, time in zone. So the Sundays that would, in March and April and maybe dedicated to like a 4 hour endurance ride, the new Sunday would probably be a 40-kilometer mock TT coming after deadlifts on Saturday evening.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So, and that is training, right? And how does your like nutrition and hydration for training and racing look like?
That also depends. So for me, it's actually very, very, very different for a lot of different people, because what works for me may not necessarily work for the person sitting next to me. But it's it depends on the individual. It also depends on the environment. Like for me, because I live in Goa, it's super humid over here year round. So the amount of water I need to consume on and off the bike, the amount of salts I need to consume on and off the bike, naturally that shoots up a lot more, only to make sure that I don't lose those many fluids and I don't let that affect my performance on the bike. Nutrition would be largely the same whether or not I'm in Goa versus elsewhere, because largely for me the carbohydrate requirement is going to be roughly the same whether I'm racing in 35 degrees or 20 degrees. So when I'm doing a recovery ride, I would probably not consume any carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of electrolytes, fasten up, reload. That's about it. But when I'm doing an endurance ride, like I'll be out on a zone two ride, I will normally be consuming anywhere between 50 to 60 grams of carbs an hour. So I look at it in terms of grams of carbohydrates per hour, and with a big differentiation between low glycemic index and high glycemic index carbohydrates. I will only be consuming low GI carbs when I'm doing a zone two ride or less than a zone two ride. I mean, the moment I exceed that zone two threshold, the moment I'm doing anything that is zone three or above, all of my carbohydrates are high GI, and all of them are going to come through liquid or semi-solid sources. So for me, it's either going to be a liquid carb mix or it's going to be coming in through a gel. So zone three and maybe kind of low zone four, those sweet spot efforts, I'll probably be doing about 75 to 85 grams of carbs an hour. Zone four intervals, I will probably be doing about 90 grams an hour. And when I'm racing, so when I did the BBCH Classic, for example, both the BBCH races I did last year and even nationals, because those were the biggest road races I had done last year, I was consuming anywhere between 110 and 130 grams of carbs an hour. So this was all through high GI sources. Everything was coming in through some form of sucrose. So I would normally have maybe a carb mix with fasten up reload, fasten up gels in the hours leading to the finish. And then in the 1 hour leading to the finish, I would have a finisher bottle. So that would probably be like, 1 liter of Fanta. And I'll consume that for the last hour. And that's it. That's my usual
Right.
nutrition routine. Yeah.
Excellent. So, in terms of low GI foods for low intensity efforts, what do you usually go with?
Usually, when I'm doing zone two rides, sometimes I will go with a banana, oat bars, stuff like that. Rice cakes. Although rice cakes aren't really that low glycemic index. Oat bars and bananas are usually what I would normally consume. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of consuming bananas when I train, simply because I'm not a big fan of the taste. So I would much rather consume a liquid carb mix rather than a banana. And because that doesn't really give me any GI distress lately, I've just been doing that.
Right, right.
Yeah, I am,
Excellent.
for some reason, and this is just very personal to me. It's not necessarily the same for everybody. I don't like chewing when I'm riding a bike. Sounds a bit weird. I know.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't like to chew when I'm riding a bike, and I feel like it disrupts my breathing. And I
Mm,
mean, honestly, it's been a very long time since I consumed any solid food while actually riding. Everything's just been
mm.
liquids and semi-solids.
Right, right. It's pretty much similar to me actually. I mean, usually when I kind of started, I used to have an electrolyte mix, especially for the endurance rides. Electrolyte mix, maybe fasten up or something, and then some sort of chicky, that kind of
Yeah,
peanut chicky or whatever, right? Uh, but then over the years, it kind of moved to kind of carb mix it. But there are with all the kind of training, hours and hours of training, and these like sugary drinks, carb mixes, we need to be very careful with our teeth.
hmm.
Right? Did you experience any of that yet?
Fortunately not, no. But I keep getting my HbA1c levels checked regularly. So teeth, I like to think
See?
I have nice teeth and no cavities yet, at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like you're 24 and I am 48. There is some difference there, but
Yeah,
the
yeah,
but
that's true as well. Yeah, yeah,
but this is something that all of us, not just you and me, and every one of us who are like relying on sugary kind of uh, drink mixes, gels, and all these things, right? We need to be a little bit more careful with the our dental hygiene and stuff like that, because it can really affect resulting in cavities, sensitivity and all that stuff. Okay, coming back
yeah.
to you and you were racing, right? What is what was the your most memorable race
My most
so far?
memorable race. This would probably be, well, I enjoy all of the races I do, well, most of them. Uh, the most memorable one would probably be the 2022 Nationals in Shirdi. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason this was memorable is because race day was 11 weeks after a surgery on my left shoulder. So,
Mm.
so to give you a little bit of a backstory, October 21st or October 22nd is when I had a crash in training where I landed on my left side and my left collarbone was shattered into four pieces. So there was one clean break in the shaft and there were two floating fragments in there. And
Wow.
because I have worked with people who have had broken collarbones in the past, just hairline fractures. I've never worked with anybody with a comminuted fracture. The comminuted fracture is
Mm.
like shattered, right? And a hairline fracture is just one small crack in the bone, but the bone is largely still in place. So for me, it was a comminuted fracture. My left collarbone was shattered into four pieces, and I was unconscious for only a few seconds. But when I regained consciousness, I got back up, and when you crash, there's this big surge in adrenaline. So you don't really feel the pain in the moment. But then a few hours later, when you're dressing up the wounds and getting all the dirt out, that's when it really starts to hit you. So I could feel that I can see my bike on the road. My right hand is moving fine, but why is my left hand not moving? and and then I try to move it a little bit, and there's this massive surge of pain that's coming in from the collarbone, and it took me a minute to realize that okay, I've probably broken my left collarbone now. And at the time I knew that collarbone breaks are very common in the sport of cycling because that's the first place you land. So yeah, I thought it was a collarbone fracture. I immediately called my mom, like, "Hey mom, I think I broke my left collarbone." They're like, "What?" So like, yeah, heading to the hospital now. Come to this hospital. So went to the hospital, got a couple of X-rays. Exactly what I feared the most was what the X-ray said. It was a comminuted fracture of four pieces, and I was like, damn it. Now at the time, I didn't know when nationals was because the date of nationals had actually gotten postponed that year. So according to me, at the time, if I remember correctly, nationals was probably supposed to be in November or December, something around that
Right.
time. I don't remember the exact dates, but it had got postponed to Jan. Fortunate for me. So I was like, oh, okay, this looks bad. I may have to bench nationals, but let's see what the doctor says. So got an opinion from an orthopedic surgeon over here in Goa, and he said that yeah, this is not looking good. Um, Most likely going to need a surgery, and nationals looks very unlikely because cases like these, I would normally recommend the person to rest for at least 3 to 4 weeks before they perform any kind of 3 to 4 months, sorry, not weeks, before they perform any kind of physical activity. So I was like, dude, I've got nationals in a few weeks. Do something. Fix it. So at the time, I was working with Naveen, and while I was sitting in the orthopedic surgeon's clinic, I gave Naveen a call so they can both have a chat. And I was like, "Hey man, this is what the doctor is saying," and I was very sad about it. And the ortho was like, "Yeah, no, this guy can't be racing in a few weeks. He's gonna have to rest." And yeah, I decided to get the surgery the next night. That's what we did. I didn't know when nationals was, but I wanted to see what would happen if I did absolutely everything I could to get back into top shape as quick as possible, still not knowing when the exact date is. So I was like, yeah, you know what? The doctors asked me to rest. Fair enough. I think I know enough about my body to know what would be pushing it. And why don't I operate right at that threshold of healthy and unhealthy? Why don't I operate right at that threshold of what is good for me and not, take that extra step which is going to send me plummeting down a cliff? So
Hmm.
that's what I decided to do. I didn't see a single physiotherapist. I had video called my physiotherapist from Pune. This crash happened in Goa. My physio was in Pune. So I video called him. We had like one or two video calls, but that's about it, where I just showed him my range of motion. And I would spend every single day about maybe an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 divided across three separate sessions in the day, just rehabbing. So hundreds of reps of shoulder flexion and external rotation and extension and what have you. And eventually after that, it started to get a lot better just by the first day, by the second day, by the third day. By the fourth day, I was able to perform a complete elbow flexion. So what that means is I was able to fully bend my elbow like this on my left hand. So
Right.
obviously, because when the surgery happens, then you're basically just rupturing a whole bunch of nerves, right? Which kind of destroys the neural connections that you've got, and it takes quite some time to rebuild those. So for me, the day after the surgery, I had no strength in my left bicep to be able to perform that movement. But 4 days in, I was able to do it. And this was in the morning. I got super excited. I was like, I'm able to do this now. Let me try and ride the bike today. So bike was on the trainer. I put a different stem on the bike. So I went from running a 120 mil minus 16-degree stem to what at the time was, I think it was an 80 plus 16-degree stem, something of that sort. So left arms in a sling, right arms on the hood, and I started spinning. I was like, yeah, you know what? This doesn't actually feel that bad. I did like a 15-minute or a 20-minute spin that day, and and eventually we had to keep things very, very, very controlled. But then eventually after that, again with the help of structured training, I was able to get back on my feet. And my first ride outside was, I think, in about 4 or 5 weeks after surgery. That was a very scary ride because it takes a lot of time for you to get your confidence back. I mean, after something like that happens, at least for me, it kind of changed the way I approach the sport. Because when that happened, it's like I am doing all of this at 100% after the crash. What was I waiting for before the crash? It's like when you
Mm.
experience something like this, you kind of realize that there is still so much that you're leaving on the table. And then while I was not riding outside, while I was still on the trainer, the dates for nationals were out. It was confirmed. The Cycling Association of Maharashtra said it's going to be from 7th to 11th January in 2023 in Shirdi. I was like, okay, we're less than 10 weeks away from nationals. My left arm is still in a sling, and I can still not ride my bike outside, but things are not looking good. There's no way around it. Things are not looking good. But I knew for a fact that I would be kicking myself if I did not do everything I possibly could to make sure I get in top shape to the state trials, because you have to clear the state trials before you get to nationals. So
Right.
that's that's what I told myself, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I I don't know where this is going to lead me. I don't even know if I'll be able to make it to the state trials. Even if I do make it, I mean, thank God, even if I finish in the top 10, but let's see what comes of it, right? Let's do everything we can. So countdown started from there. State trials, 25th December, finished second. I think it was second by not a very big margin. I think 5 or 6 seconds. And then 13 days later was nationals, where I finished third in nationals overall, which was quite a shocker for me. I mean, if you look at my position on the TT bike on the day of the states and the nationals, you'll see that my spine was actually very tilted. So I was putting a lot more load on my right hand compared to the left. Both of my upper traps were absolutely burning in the second, third, and fourth quarters of the TT. But that's the thing, right? I mean, I knew that I did everything I could to get to the start line in this shape. And more importantly, more than me, there were a great set of people that surrounded me that got me there in that shape, right? My mom, a few friends of mine that really, really, really supported me just to be able to get me there. The interesting thing is that it is an individual time trial, but there was nothing individual about that, nothing at all, right?
Mm.
If it was not
Mm.
for the people that surrounded me, forget finishing third. I would probably not even make it to Shirdi in one piece in the first place, right? So
Right. Right.
it's not like the people that supported me did what they did because they expected a certain result out of it. They did what they did because, they love me and care for me and they want to see me healthy. But the thing is that when you're in that situation and somebody goes out of their way to help you in the way that they did, I know they don't expect a performance, but this is the way I looked at it was this is now an obligation. And it's not about me anymore. I have to deliver not just for myself, but for these people as well. And eventually the result was announced. First, second, and third, Chinmay come to the dope testing tent. I was like, okay, is this a random check? Are you joking with me right now? But turns out I entered the tent and there was only three people there and I was the third. And I was like, okay, this is actually the podium then. This is not like a random number that they're checking. So like, okay, Chinmay finished third. Fair enough. That's pretty cool. That's when I started making phone calls and stuff. Hey mom, finish third. So yeah, that was
Amazing.
this has to be the most memorable race for me. 100%. Nothing comes close.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So the it is while there are people around you who kind of supported you in the journey to get there, right? It's also the intent of you know not using that crash as uh, I mean, not letting that crash hold you back, right? Not giving up and trying to do whatever you could to, you know, make make sure that you are there. Give yourself every chance to make it to the start line, right? So that if that intent isn't there from you, no, no one around you could be doing anything to help you, right? That has to start from the individual, and it will kind of percolate and get people around you motivated to, see you succeed. At least the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that entire incident that made me realize how much I have been leaving on the table before this, before October 2022. And
Mm,
once nationals were over and I got the result that I was hoping for, I wouldn't say that I was in my best shape. I mean, I was far from my best shape. There's no denying that. But when stuff like that happens, it just completely changes you. You don't approach the concept of improvement with the same eyes anymore. You don't approach the sport with the same eyes anymore. It's almost like it's too dramatic for me to say that I was a changed person because I wasn't. It's just that my belief in that, the same thing, my belief in the fact that the only thing that's real is the work, was was even more reinforced now more than ever. And
mm,
eventually, because of that, sure, it's not like that much changed in my training plan. It's not like that much changed in my daily routine. It's just that everything got so much better because it wasn't 100% perfect before to begin with. It's not even 100% perfect right now because I think that there is no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as the perfect lead into a bike race. It's
definitely.
there's always going to be something that's off, maybe in the route recce that you're doing 2 days before the race, your car's tire gets punctured, or maybe at the start line when the commissaire is saying 10, 9, 8, and you check your brakes for rub, there's a little bit of disc brake rub. That's bad mechanics. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there's absolutely no such thing as the perfect lead into the bike race. It just does not exist, and that's okay. That's okay. We need
Yeah,
to find a way to make it work anyway. And um, the number of times you're going to succeed is always going to be directly proportional to the number of times you're going to say, screw it, I'm going to find a way to make it work.
absolutely, absolutely right. One of my friends on this very podcast was, telling me, you won't make it to the finish line unless you make it to the start line. First, you have to make it across to the start line. Give yourself a chance to get to the finish line, right? So unless you say screw it, I'm going to do it anyway, something or the other is going to come in the way of giving you an excuse to not even start, or start with holding yourself back, right? So there is no such thing as perfect lead up, like you said, neither in racing or in life.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're always going to have more reasons to fail than you will to succeed. That's just that's just
Yeah,
a rule. And even
right.
inside your head, there's always, whether it's, taking a risky life decision or a risky athletic decision or whatever it may be, starting a new business or changing houses or whatever it may be, whatever is considered to be a quote unquote big decision, there are always going to be more voices in your head that say don't do it than there will be that say do it every single
Hmm.
time. And what I've realized is the reason that's the case is because our brains are wired to be inclined towards familiarity every single time. If it is familiar, that means it's good. That's the way the human brain thinks, right? The reason something may seem uncomfortable at first is because it is an unfamiliar environment. But the moment you step into it, you never know. It's a whole different world out there. And when it comes to bike racing, I mean, when you're in the first quarter of a time trial, you don't have to think about the second and the third and the fourth. You just need to think about the next pedal stroke. You just need to think about the next breath. When you're chopping a tree down, you don't need to look at the whole log. You just need to focus on the next hit and then the next hit and then the next hit. And eventually you keep plugging and eventually something good comes of it. So
Yeah.
that's just the way I look at it. You don't have to keep thinking about the whole course that's there in front of you. You've got a plan. For me, on that day, my plan was quarter one, 250 watts, quarter two 260 watts, quarter three 270. Hopefully, I make it to 270 in quarter three if I have the legs. And quarter four, don't look at numbers, just empty the tank. That's what it was for me. And I was able to hit one and two. Quarter three was a little bit iffy because I was having a lot of discomfort in my neck. Quarter four was also not exactly where I wanted it to be. It was a few watts under. But that's the thing. For me, it was fine. Your upper trap's hurting. Big deal. You don't need to think about the fact that you're going to have to deal with upper trap pain for the next 35 minutes. You need to think about how you're going to be dealing with your upper trap pain for the next pedal stroke. And then do that for the next 35 minutes. And when you look at it that way, that pain and suffering becomes so much more manageable.
Yeah, when you kind of break it down and bring it to the smallest chunk, right?
Yeah.
How you eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
It's a nice way to put it.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So, and you, that was so a bronze at the nationals.
That was a bronze in the under 23 nationals ITT in Shirdi.
Awesome, awesome. And after that, you moved to elite, right?
Yes. So my first elite, my only elite medal was at the national games in Goa, which was a few months later. So this was in November 2023. Not too far from where I live, actually. So it's a route I commonly
Mm.
use for training. So you can say there was a home advantage because fourth place was only 2 seconds away from me. So
So this was a another TT,
this was also a TT. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And this was another bronze,
This was also a
or
bronze. The first was Naveen, second was Srinath,
mm,
and third was me.
right, right. And this is yeah, home advantage, and uh, it'll it. I think it is a course that would probably suit uh, lighter riders. Maybe it's like more undulating
I wouldn't
than the
say,
usual national courses.
yeah, I wouldn't say lighter riders because so there was one climb, but it wasn't a very steep one. So it would take
Mm.
probably if you're going full gas, if you're climbing that thing at like 300, 350 watts as most of us did, then it would probably take you about 1 minute 45 to 1 minute 55 just to get over
Oh,
that climb. And the
right.
average gradient, if I remember correctly, would probably be about 3.5% So it's
Mm.
not actually that steep. So it's not
Correct.
necessarily a course that favors the lighter rider, but it's also
Mm.
not the kind of course that favors a pure time trialist because it's a very
Right.
undulating course. So even if you're going to be averaging, 300 watts at the end of the course, you're never actually going to be doing 300 watts in the course itself because it's so
Mm.
incredibly undulating that you're always going to be, 10% over or 10% under. So
Correct.
there's never any in between. So the person who knows how to be able to regulate that is the person that's eventually going to be able to win. So pacing was a big part of the TT. I
Mm.
Pacing this course was actually a very 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 tricky one. So that climb was part of the course. Obviously, you need to be descending that as well. So, for example, if you're going to be going really hard into the descent, doing even if you do like 80% of your FTP in the descent or 90% of your FTP, you're probably overshooting it because even if you do like 100 watts more than you should be in the descent, because the descent is so short, it's a minute or less than a minute in some cases if you're going really fast. So you're probably going to save maybe 3 4 seconds, and this is me being generous. So in most cases, a little bit
Mm.
lesser. You could be doing 100 watts extra. The energy cost that you're putting in just to be able to save those 2 to 4 seconds is so much more. And you would rather want to put that energy into the climb where forget doing 100 watts extra, even doing 20 or 30 watts extra using the same energy is going to save you so much more. So the 3 seconds you may save on the descent, it's costing you a solid 20, 30 seconds on the climb. And then you have to do that
Mm.
descent and that climb 3 times over. So it's
Right.
eventually compounded, right? So for that course in Goa, pacing was a big one.
Mm. So how do you pace for a course like that versus say a flatter course? Say something like the one was the course in Shirdi flatter, or
It was
was
a
it
lot
something
flatter than
similar?
Goa. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
particularly like pancake flat. It was definitely a lot flatter than the one in Goa. So when it comes to a flat course, you also need to look at the wind conditions. Well, in every course, you need to be looking at the wind conditions. But assuming the winds are neutral, assuming there's no winds, then on a flat course, what I would normally do is I would walk in with a certain target power range. I would make sure that my values for quarter one, quarter two are fully cemented. I would keep quarter three a little bit more open because at the end of the second quarter, I would normally be running an inventory check. How much do my legs have? How much does my body have? And then take a call about what I should be doing in quarter three. And quarter four, in most cases, is just empty the tank. If it's a fully flat course, then it's empty the tank.
Mm.
So that's what it would be for me. If the flat course has a few small uphills and a few small downhills, depending on how steep those uphills and downhills are, it would be, maybe 5 to 10% extra in the uphills and 5 to 10% extra in the downhills. The faster you're going, the more aerodynamics tends to make a difference. So if you're going on an uphill, then focus a little bit, still stay in the tuck, but focus a little bit more on power production. If your goal for that quarter is say 250 watts and say a 3% uphill comes, then maybe don't do 250, do 280, and that's okay. But then when the downhill comes, focus a little bit more on the tuck because you're going to be going a lot faster. So try to get your head low, try to shrug your shoulders a little bit more. But it's okay if you're not doing 250. You can even be doing 220 or 210 at that point because you're anyway going to be traveling fast and you want to save the energy for the next uphill. So that would be my protocol for a flat course TT. The reason I like to negative split my efforts, it also depends on the course for the most part, but the reason I would like to negative split my efforts is because naturally, when your body is using carbohydrates as its primary fuel source, the byproduct of carbohydrate utilization is lactate. And that heavy feeling that you get in the legs after you push really hard, that's all just lactate accumulation. The more you can delay lactate production, the more power you'll be able to produce and the faster you'll be able to go just by starting off a little bit slower compared to how you finish. Because if you start off super hard, yes, there is a high metabolic cost to that. But because of the fact that now you have already accumulated so much lactic acid in the legs, instead of focusing on power production, your muscles are now just focusing on clearing that lactate at doing 20 watts lesser, which is a bit purpose defeating. So for me, the go-to, especially a flat course, is start off super 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 conservative and then gradually ramp it up as the effort comes to you rather than holding one power for the whole race or rather than starting off too hard and then blowing up at the end. This is what it would be for a flat TT. For an undulating TT, like the one in Goa, for example, the race in Goa was 2.5 laps. So you would have to do the one climb that we spoke about 3 times and it would finish on top of that climb. For me, it was the same thing. The goal is to negative split, but that negative splitting also needs to be done in accordance with the terrain. So for me, instead of dividing my race into 4 quarters, a lot of it was actually done by feel because you can't remember numbers for 50 different segments in the race. So a lot of the race in Goa was actually done by feel. For me, the only numbers that I had pinned down in my head was the watts I'm supposed to be doing on that big climb because I knew that that one big climb is eventually going to be the winning factor, right? The person who climbs that climb the fastest is the person who's going to be winning the bike race at the end of it. So the only numbers that I had pinned down was the first time we go across the climb, I have to be doing 280. The second time we go across the climb, I have to be doing 300. And the last time, I better have the energy to completely empty myself. Hopefully, I'm able to pull off 320 or above. And I did. I ended up doing some 330 or 340 on the way back on the climb. So when I was descending that climb, I was doing like 130 watts, 140 watts, 150 watts, and that's it. Right? For me, the goal is exactly the
Basically
same.
recovering.
Pretty
Yeah.
much recovering. If you would look at my heart rate graph from that workout, there's always a massive spike when you would see the uphill, and then this huge drop in that 1 minute, which eventually led to the downhill. So basically, just conserving the energy for when it matters most, right? When you're on the
Yeah.
downhills, focus on aerodynamics and maybe a bit less power. That's okay. So you can conserve energy for the more important parts of the race. When you're into uphills, you don't necessarily need to focus too much on keeping your head super low and your shoulders super shrugged. You still want to be aero, but this is when you want to be focusing on power production. So in a TT, the slowest points in the course are where you can make the biggest differences. And the slowest points are usually when you're riding into a headwind, when you're riding into an uphill. The fastest points are usually where you make the least differences, and that's where you want to be saving your energy. That's when you're riding into a downhill, or that's when you're riding into a tailwind. So you take these principles and you combine them based on the conditions of the course, and that's what allows you to find that perfect pacing strategy.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, this, I mean, this is quite useful, tips and insights into pacing, the nutrition, training, and everything. This has been, we should have done this way earlier, but glad we
Yeah,
did it now.
likewise.
um, what are some of the tips that you would give working athletes to do well at sport and work in general?
Yeah, I think structure makes you faster. So let me elaborate on that a little bit. I know a lot of athletes, working and non-working, that still believe that if we go out and ride our bikes every single day, as hard as we can, as fast as we can, as long as we can, that's probably going to lead to some performance gain. And it does, until you hit a plateau. And that's when you need to start playing around with these faders that we spoke about. So structure is super important for every single athlete if they want to progress to their maximal capabilities. That is true. More so for people who are very short on time. So if you only have, an hour available a day, or even 45 minutes available in the day, it's not true that just because you are short on time, your growth is limited. You can still make the most of that 45 minutes you've got, or you can still make the most of that 1 hour you've got, just by using it in a way that kind of maximizes your progress. So
Absolutely.
that's, I work with people who are 45 years old, 50 years old, 55 years old, who have 3 kids and are managing businesses and have a family to take care of and are investors in some company, and they keep having meetings and they keep having to travel. And if you are on top of communication with your coach, if you are on top of how your body is responding to the different training stimuli, and if you actually follow a specific structured training plan, you can still hit your goals as long as you have a certain level of structure to back it up. If anyone tells you that
Absolutely.
45 minutes a day or 1 hour a day on weekdays is too less and preventing you from achieving your goals, most cases that's actually not true. You just need to know what to do with that 45 minutes or that 1 hour.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. All right. It's been a blast, Chinmay. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your experience with the Working Athlete podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me. I've been a fan of the Working Athlete podcast for quite some time, so it's nice to be here for the first time.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe first of many times, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes, I hope the next time we meet,
Yeah.
there's a lot more for us to talk about. Maybe the next time we meet, I'll be Chinmay the footballer. Who knows?
I
Yeah.
hope not. But thank you.
Yes, thanks again for having me.
That was my conversation with Chinmay. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding them useful, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.